ce știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. холостяк, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, реют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome along. And I have returned to you following a period of absence caused by a joyful and joyous incident, which is, of course, the birth of our daughter, who is now almost 3 weeks old. So, yes, we have a new set of vocal talents in the household. So if you hear an interjection at some point, it is most likely her demanding food usually. So, but she is being looked after downstairs at the moment. So thank you everybody for bearing with me during that 2 weeks of what I'm going to call paternity leave. I am back online tonight, and this is the return of regular broadcasting, and the subjects under discussion tonight mainly going to be about what, if anything, the US imperialists are planning to do with regard to Iran, and a discussion around that. We're also going to cover the latest scandals with relation to the Epstein files, whole series of revelations coming out about that yesterday, and including several revelations that directly implicate Trump, which means that Trump's Department of Justice isn't actually very good at covering up for him, or perhaps a decision has been made somewhere along the line that Trump is now busted flush and can no longer really credibly bring his backers what they were looking to purchase. So perhaps it's time to put the old boy out to pasture and go ahead with J.D. Vance, who's now proved himself to be a fervent and rabid supporter of death squad politics, shall we say. So before we go any further, I feel it my duty just to greet everybody who's in the chat so far. So tonight we are live on YouTube and on Twitch and on Rumble and on Substack, and on us, where there's a considerable number of you already. Always good to see you there. Yeah, we got 280 of you on X, which is you can find us on Substack as well, and 135 of you on YouTube. Good stuff. So those in the chat so far, let's do some greetings here. We've got Nobody, Lombard, Wicked Witch of the Southeast, who apparently is coming to us from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I believe is what NC stands for. It's and you're immersed in snow. Hello to, well, hopefully you can get dug out of it soon. Hello to M Tanks. Hello to Nikki. Hello to Walter. Yes, we are live on Rumble on the Marx Engels Lenin Stalin Mao channel. Good afternoon to David Ball. Hello to Zukov's Boots. Hello to Barney Boomer. And yes, live from the land of Mark Kai. We have Astqui 8837 from Sweden. We have Elaine Klein. I hope you all enjoyed the thumbnail, by the way. Elaine certainly seemed to. Yes, that did feature Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth in his traditional pose, Lindsey Graham, and J.D. Vance, fat J.D. Vance, flying in a jet-powered golden toilet over the Persian Gulf, being chased down by an Iranian ballistic missile. What's not to enjoy about that? And they say that AI isn't creative. Well, the creation was me, but the tool did the job. So we've got another viewer in Winston-Salem. No one's here. 198. Hello to you. Hello to Irish Partisan, our comrade in Minsk. How you doing? We also have C. Bolt, who says, Taco. Well, let's see. Trump might get himself into a hole he can't be dug out of. Hello to Jenny, our moderator. Hello to Riel Bertrand, who's coming also to us from the land of Canada, the land of my former podcast partner, Layla, as well. Hello to Defiance856, Zain Mudassir, Thomas Wolf, who says, welcome back. I hope both your fiance and new child are happy and healthy. They are indeed. Thank you for inquiring. And congratulations to you too. Thank you very much. Let's hope your child grows up in a brand new Scottish Soviet Socialist Republic. Well, let's hope so. Certainly, that would be a more popular option than the current offer put on our plate by the bourgeois parties in Scotland, which consists of several different varieties of servants of British imperialism. We've got Jessica Fitt coming to us from Margate in perfidious Albion. Margate, I went through there once, many years ago. Hello to David Ball up in Canada. We've got Peep Show 090, who says, good evening, my friend. I have a horrible feeling that something is going to happen. The awful stuff coming out from the Epstein files today has to be distracted and kicked from the public's attention. Well, I'll come to that in just a moment. I mean, yeah, well, I'll pick up back on your comment because there's things to be said about that. So, who else we got here? We have Comrade Jawad, we have Edward, um, and solidarity to you from over there in the once and future Latvian Soviet Socialist Republic. Thomas Wolfe misses the Ballad of Stalin in the intro. Well, maybe we might include that. Maybe there'll be some new intro music that'll be mixed up a bit pretty soon. Who knows? Thank you to everybody for all the congratulations. And okay, we've also got Nush82. Thanks to David Ball for the congratulations. We've got Fortune Hunter's wife. We have Alistair Page McGill coming to us from Prague. Ronald Aaron Lopez says JD Vance is a war criminal, a fugitive. Well, he certainly should be. He certainly should be a fugitive. I mean, man is a criminal, as is Trump. We'll come to the Trump allegations against Trump in just a moment. But hello to Robert Zvoronich, and thank you for the congratulations. We have Street Cat Munchies. We have Tim Gray. We have Luca. Hello to you, comrade. And we've got Davey over there in the wild westerly point of Wales. Hello to Alan Smith, coming to us from Georgia. That is Georgia, USA. Would I be able to squeeze in a quick comment about Carney's speech and the by-election? Yeah, we'll come to the by-election later. If I don't come to it tonight, we'll get to it tomorrow. Okay, so we've also got Michael McGoldrick and Ben Horst coming to us from Toronto. So we begin tonight with the US-Iran current debacle, I think is the thing to say. So we've got various different timelines on what is going on here. So we have one carrier strike group currently being deployed in or around the area of the Persian Gulf, which is the USS Abraham Lincoln's carrier strike group. There is also reports that the US is deploying B-2 bombers and enhancing its fighter squadron presence in its bases across the West Asian region. There are conflicting reports as to the attitude of the Gulf tyrannies on the usage of their territory by the US. The Saudis and even the UAE were reported fairly recently to be opposed to the usage of their territory by the US, knowing that if it is used, there's a very strong risk that the Iranians strike back immediately, not just at the US military base there, but possibly at their oil and gas industries as well, which would be potentially devastating, not just for them, but for the global oil price. In fact, it may well be the thing that pushes the whole global economy into a gigantic recession. So there is also a report I've seen today that the Saudi Minister of Defense is over in Washington actually lobbying for a strike on Iran, but one that doesn't involve them. So typically, typical of the Al Saud family, slippery, duplicitous bastards to the end. So the Trump says that he was deploying a big, beautiful armada, which, while as a carrier strike group is pretty large and contains a lot of capacity for destruction in terms of aircraft, in terms of the firing of sea-to-ground missiles or sea-to-air missiles, it's not enough to destroy the Iranian government, to destroy the system of the Islamic Republic. So it does raise the question of what exactly they're planning to do, or do they even know yet, is an interesting question. So the way in which this is looking right now is that clearly Trump wants to do something, but they don't have the forces available to them to carry out the kind of bombing campaign that would destroy a strong and relatively unified system, which has been proved recently by the fact that for a good 3 weeks, the Mossad, CIA, MI6 assets on the ground in Iran unleashed what would effectively amounted to like urban warfare, just killing large numbers of people, especially security officials, burning buildings, etc. You get the feeling that that was meant to cause greater instability than it ultimately did. Ultimately, a lot of people died, but it didn't cause the system of the Islamic Republic to fracture. So you get the feeling that Trump maneuvering this carrier strike group into position was meant to come as the system started to disintegrate. Now, if you recall, all the way back 15 years ago, long time now, to the way in which the Libyan war went, what happened there was that when you got the heavily manipulated uprising in Benghazi, for instance, what happened there was that the Libyan government correctly moved to put it down. That's when the threats came in of, well, we will carry out airstrikes on you if you do that. That's when the violence in Benghazi intensified, and ultimately the UN Security Council, with the connivance, by the way, of the Russians, let's not forget their sins, passed a resolution licensing airstrikes on Libya. Now, the Russians, of course, will play dumb and claim that they couldn't possibly know that this would be interpreted as a blank check for regime change. But I don't believe that the men that run the Russian system are that stupid. I don't believe that at the time President Medvedev is that stupid. I don't believe that Sergei Lavrov is that stupid. And I certainly don't believe that Vladimir Putin is that stupid. The truth is that they chose to sell Libya to the US in the hope of getting some concession from the United States, and they got nothing in return. What a surprise. Russian bourgeois bargaining turns out to be crap, as always. Now, the point about how this compares to Iran was that when they made those threats to the Libyan government that they were going to start bombing, they clearly intensified their manipulations and their attempt to bring people over from the Libyan government side to defect to the imperialist side. Because you remember, certainly the Libyan diplomatic corps split. A lot of the diplomatic staff in Western Europe and the United States started openly saying they supported the opposition, which basically meant that the US, the British, the French, and remember the French were the leading force in lobbying for this war. They were more keen on it even than Obama was, even than Hillary Clinton was. Maybe it's because Sarkozy didn't want to pay back the loan that he got from Gaddafi. Now, the point here as to how it compares to Iran was that when Trump made his threats regarding they better not execute those prisoners, or they better not fire on those demonstrators, when he made that threat, that was clearly meant to do something similar. Something similar was either supposed to happen or they thought it was going to happen, which is that they would start to see defections from within the Iranian system, maybe amongst the diplomatic corps. And you can guarantee that any defection would have been celebrated and put all over the nightly news. Now, no such defections happened. No such defections happened either outside of Iran from the Iranian diplomatic corps or inside. There was nothing. There was no fracturing of the system, which basically meant that the US was left standing there with its dick in the wind. Because as we have covered on this program before, and as I will go back to now, the whole purpose of the Western way of war really does prove how much of a genius Karl von Clausewitz was when he said, paraphrasing here, that war was a continuation of policy by other means, the means, of course, being extremely violent. Now, that dictum and the analysis that Clausewitz gives of war, and I recommend I recommend if you have the time that you read the entirety of On War. It's actually a pretty easy read. And some of the historical detail is a bit anachronistic, but the principles, I think, can lead you to actually properly understand any war, which is that Clausewitz, being a good dialectician, albeit one more in the Hegelian mode, not necessarily a materialist, but there is not in the Marxist sense, but there is a materialist element to his philosophy of war, which is that he locates war correctly, which is that it is not a sphere that operates somewhere separate to anything else. How could it? War and how a state wages war is contingent upon how a state is constructed, what is its economic foundation? Is it able to support and sustain large armies in the field? Is it able to produce the war material necessary for a prolonged war? Can its political system survive a prolonged war? Does its political system have enough legitimacy to survive that? And the answer for the United States is no on all those counts. See, war is, again, like Clausewitz correctly locates it as being something which is integrated with the entire rest of any state's economy and political structure, cultural structures, etc. And the United States has constructed a way of war which is very much reflective of the way in which it operates as a global neo-colonial power. And it's reflective also of the fact that after the Vietnam War and after that disastrous defeat, which American generals at the time, like Westmoreland, like to cry about how we just didn't take the gloves off. Well, or we won every battle in that war, which isn't true, but that's what they like to say. The American ruling class, after the disasters in Vietnam and after the mass revolts against the draft, decided that they couldn't afford to actually have the kind of massive army that was dependent upon drafting men anymore. So for a while, they made up for that by having a system of whereby like the soldier would get like far greater benefits for them and their family than they would if they were not in the military. There's far more. It was basically a welfare state was built for military families that still certainly exist, though if you believe the reports about Veterans Affairs services and other things that are associated with military service, it's certainly declined. But the point is that American society, and this is also true of the rest of the West as well, also became more and more hyper alienated and atomized after the 1970s. You got more and more examples of the US ruling class pursuing a very deliberate strategy of making sure that military service was something which was actually quite small in terms of the amount of the population that was actually affected by it. And this is quite deliberate, and it meant that the way in which they engaged in war had to change. So they received a huge favor in terms of their ability to do this from the counter-revolution that collapsed the Soviet Union and the people's democracies, because suddenly they had no peer-level competitor in the 90s and the 2000s that would go against them, and they were able to restructure their military in order to fight purely local, small-scale operations, small-scale, basically neo-colonial wars. And what that meant was you didn't need to do vast mobilizations. You didn't even need to have the US military-industrial base became more and more inefficient as time went on. So they were spending a larger and larger amount of money to produce less and less. Now you've got Trump going, we need $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion military budget. Well, you actually look at what it produces for the United States, it's far less than the budget produced like 30 years ago. Trump keeps going on about the need to catch up with the Chinese on shipbuilding. Well, good luck with that. And we all know we know the reasons why, which is that imperialism, which is what the US system is, imperialism being the highest stage of capitalism, is a tremendously inefficient system when it comes to actually investment in manufacturing. To actually create any kind of manufacturing capacity in the United States takes far more money. And that's partly because, of course, the cost of labor is higher at the moment anyway. But it's also because like imperialism creates very inefficient systems. It creates a very parasitic system. It creates by necessity hundreds of middlemen in every single transaction, because what the system's designed to do is to just basically move money around. It's not designed to produce anything. The production's all meant to be done elsewhere, and even in terms of military production, this was the case. The US had to basically try and work for a decade to try and reshore their production of component parts for their armored vehicles, because so much of it was just being made in China. So the point about all of this is that you have, with to go back to Clausewitz's dictum about war being an extension of policy by other means, the economic basis of the United States now, being a very late stage imperialist country, is based on essentially financialization and the movement of capital, not on the production of commodities. And it's very, very difficult to turn that around. Now, politically speaking, they have modeled their army on basically recruiting people from, like, in terms of the rank and file, from the poorest sections of American society, that will look at like a military wage as something which is far better than they would have got anywhere else. And they huge numbers of the great bulk of the, of the rest of American society doesn't want to serve and does not serve. The brief flutter of patriotic impulses after 9/11 petered out pretty fucking quickly when they got themselves involved in a nasty insurgency against their occupation of Iraq. Nobody wanted to go over there and get their legs blown off. And the casualties in terms of the ultimate level of injuries, long-term disfiguring injuries in Iraq and Afghanistan was much higher than they were admitting to at the time. So they have, in terms of size of military, in terms of size of the amount of the army they could actually deploy, it's relatively small. And again, they resist in putting in place a draft, because you put in place a draft in American society right now with this very low confidence of the population in American institutions, a political class which is utterly despised. You know what? Donald Trump's going to ask you to go and get your guts blown out on the shores of Persia. That's not a winner. So you have an army which is relatively small by necessity. You have a war machine which is based around quick strikes on relatively weak powers who can be put under siege for months or years beforehand, whose political structures can be hollowed out and bought out by the United States and its allies, and the personnel in military and intelligence and political structures can be essentially purchased and brought over to the side of the United States. And therefore, any war that you wage is over before it starts. That's how the US wages war. It's how the British do it as well, because they do not want and cannot have a prolonged war with huge casualties that also exposes their lack of manufacturing capacity. That's what the Ukrainians are for. That's why Ukraine is such an important project for them, because you have there a country which has been completely hollowed out and its entire political structure bought and controlled by Britain and the United States. And they bought themselves a population which they will now continually hurl at the Russians until either the Russians crack or the Ukrainian state ceases to exist. We'll be talking more about Ukraine tomorrow. Point about this when it comes to Iran is that deploying a carrier group was meant to be enough to secure some kind of regime change operation after the riots. They thought something was going to happen that didn't happen, and now the riots have petered out and they've been left with basically nowhere to go. They can't beat the Iranians with a carrier group and the assets that they've got in the region. It also exposes them to a giant amount of risk. Yes, the US can bomb a lot of targets in Iran, but the military targets that are really dangerous, which is the missile systems, they're very deeply buried in the Iranian mountain ranges and in the Iranian deserts. With these underground military installations were built with the assistance of the DPRK back in the late 1980s. The Iranians have had many decades to work on a defensive posture. And what the Iranian government is now saying, that they will respond in full to any attack by the United States, even one that the United States would define as being purely symbolic. And this is a unified position of the Iranian government. This is the position of the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. This is the position of even the supposed liberal President Pezeshkian. This is what has been expressed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And Iran has a military that can do damage to the United States, which is a lot of its commanders have experienced in battle. Certainly, the IRGC commanders do. They have the capacity to do a lot of damage, certainly to United States military assets on the ground in the West Asian region, but also, of course, to Israel, because any attack by the United States is going to be interpreted by the Iranian government as involving Israel, because it does. And it will be Israel that soaks up the majority of the damage from any response. The US knows this, and this is why Netanyahu is apparently feeling rather nervous about this, because he knows, because his military chiefs will have told him, that if Iran launches much bigger waves of missiles against Israel, then not only can they not stop it, but there's a big risk that they do a terminal amount of damage to Israeli military installations, Israeli civilian infrastructure, and this could compromise the integrity of the Israeli state. So there's a very, very high stakes game being played here. And I think it does expose something, which is that if Trump goes ahead with this, and the response from Iran is what they promise it will be, and I think that if anything, the last 9 months or so have only solidified the great bulk of Iranian society behind the current government, and also in determination to defend their sovereignty and independence against the US. Strikes on Israel will be overwhelmingly backed by the great majority of the Iranian population. And if the US goes ahead, it shows us quite clearly that the people making the decisions in Washington are willing to actually have Israel sacrificed in pursuit of their objectives. And I think that is something which has been too often not talked about. People say, oh, Israel wants this war. Well, do they? I mean, some in Israel are mad enough to think that it'll be a good idea for them. But those in the Israeli military and those in the Israeli intelligence services must know that their air defense performance against Iran in the 12-day war last June was not exactly positive. That they got a lot of damage done to them, and that wasn't even Iran attacking with all of its assets. If the US decides to conduct major bombing operations on Iran, then Israel will be pounded into the dust. So this shows us that, in actual fact, the Marxist-Leninist analysis of the relationship between Israel and the United States, when it comes down to it, is the correct viewpoint. There are those who say, oh, it's Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants it. Well, Netanyahu doesn't want to be prime minister of a pile of rubble. In fact, if things start going really bad, Netanyahu is usually on the first plane out of there. When it looks like things are going sideways, there's an Israeli government plane that heads off, sometimes to Cyprus, sometimes to Greece. He'll be on the first plane out, and he'll be over in exile in the United States before you can do that. That man's not committed to anything other than himself, after all. It's also worth bearing in mind, and here I would urge you to revisit the Decline and Fall interview that we did on Cyprus, where we talked about the Zionists buying up large amounts of property in Cyprus. There's also Zionists who have been caught burning down huge areas of forested territory in Argentina and Chile. And they're looking for backup options, because the smarter of them do realize that, well, things might be getting to the end for this particular iteration of the Zionist homeland project. Things might be turning a bit nasty. So I think that some of these guys are looking for a way out. And if the war in Iran does happen, that'll be a reason why they're looking for a way out. Israel, as it stands, is terminally damaged. So we go back then to the position of the Iranian government, which have correctly said that they won't accept Trump's dictations. Now, interestingly enough, Trump I don't know whether this is just because he's such a compulsive liar, he can't keep track of his own lies anymore, or that he's going nuts, as some people do argue. But he came out and said the other day that Iran needed to make a deal over nuclear enrichment, which is funny because back in to get himself out of the 12-day war, which he started back in June of last year, Trump declared that as part of Operation Midnight Hammer, that he had completely destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. So what, they rebuilt it in what, 7 months, Donald? No, of course they didn't. The truth is that Trump didn't destroy that program, and the Iranians are probably now more unified around the need for a nuclear weapons program than at any other time in their history. As an aside, I should point out at this stage that there is an argument, a very shallow and useless argument going around in so-called multipolarist circles, that nuclear weapons equals sovereignty, or nuclear weapons equals immunity to US interference. This is categorically untrue. Having nuclear weapons is not a guarantee against the US intervening in your country. Look at the fate of Pakistan, for instance. Pakistan has had nuclear weapons since at least the late 1990s. I mean, that was when both Pakistan and India were confirmed as having nuclear arsenals of their own. Did that stop the US continually intervening in Pakistan for all the period of the war, so-called war on terror? Did that stop the US sponsoring various different coups, compelling the Pakistani government to wage war inside its own territory? Did that stop the US doing the bin Laden raid? No, it didn't. So merely having them is not enough, particularly not if your political system is massively compromised, as Pakistan's is, by the US imperialists and the very corrupt comprador bourgeoisie in Pakistan, who are tied by 1,000 threads to US imperialism. No, it's not just about that. It's also about having a correct internal system. And it's much more the latter than the former. It's not just having the weapons, which gives you or a greater degree of security against US intervention. It is being able and willing to hurt the United States in a way that it would be politically unacceptable within the United States. So there's a reason why, for instance, like people say, oh, US won't touch the DPRK because they've got nukes. Well, that certainly helps. It certainly helps that the North Korean leadership took the correct decision to continually develop a nuclear weapon system, apparently with some assistance under the table from the Russians, all the way through like the later 90s and 2000s. And whilst they showed up for periodic negotiations with the United States, they did not stop the development of their nuclear weapons program, and conducted it in a way that was secure enough that the US, despite all the efforts that they would have made to disrupt it, to assassinate people, to bribe people, they did so in a way that was ultimately successful. And now they have something which can hit the west coast of the United States. But that isn't the reason why the US can't launch any kind of color revolution fuckery, shall we say, or any kind of military aggression against the DPRK. The reason why they can't, or why it would be tremendously difficult for them to do that and very risky, is because of the internal system in the DPRK. The DPRK system, based on the dictatorship of the proletariat, based on the integration of the Workers' Party of Korea into the masses, based on the Songun doctrine, which was Kim Jong-il's particular philosophical development inside the Juche idea. Juche is just fundamentally it's the Korean expression of Marxism-Leninism. But because they have got all of this right, and they have a society which is ready to defend their revolution with mass resistance to any attempt by the US imperialists and their South Korean puppets to intervene, they, even without nukes, the North Koreans can impose a very heavy price on the United States armed forces inside occupied South Korea. That a heavy price that would be unacceptable politically to any US president. That's why they don't attack Korea, the people's Korea. Yeah, having the nuclear weapons is a great help, and it was entirely the correct decision to pursue those. But if you make the comparison with a country like Pakistan, like Pakistan's been continually intervened in and fucked over by the United States for many, many decades now, even after they got nuclear weapons. So it's not just about having them. It's about having a system in place which can counteract the moves of the empire. And the people who get that the most correct are the North Koreans, because they realized, and this goes back all the way through the writings of Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il, and all in their time as paramount leaders in the DPRK, they realized as early as the 60s that what they were facing is a total hybrid war from imperialism. And they realized through their observations of how the revisionist countries turned out that allowing the rot and the filth of Western influence into your country essentially is just, it opens the door to all kinds of decay and degeneration, which you need to prevent at all costs. So the DPRK turned out to be the country that was the best suited to resist the US and its allies in the 2000s and 2010s. They'd have loved to have walked in there. They'd love to have done color revolutions. They'd have loved to have purchased the loyalty of the DPRK military hierarchy. But the DPRK runs a very effective dictatorship of the proletariat. They have very effective security services. They eliminate corrupt elements very quickly. And this has led to the US having zero luck there. The Cubans also have a very effective security service and are very effectively able to mobilize the masses in the defense of the revolution. That's why, for all Trump's announcements of a siege of Cuba, which will create more difficulties, the likelihood is that they will fail in Cuba. Not that they won't try all kinds of shenanigans inside Cuba. After all, the empire is getting rather desperate. But to go back to the Iran question, Iran survives because there's still enough of the revolution there. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 has not finished. This is an ongoing process. There's an ongoing process which involves a struggle against the external imperialist powers and an internal struggle against the comprador elements. This is something which is playing out over a long period of time. And it's a system that emerged via the Islamic Revolution that is still popularly supported enough that is able to mobilize huge amounts of the population in its defense, which is, again, that's the biggest guarantee against the kind of shenanigans that the US likes to try and pull off in these countries. So this has basically led to Trump digging himself into a hole. If he tries without some kind of agreement with the Iranians over letting Trump do some sort of symbolic strike, declare victory and run away, if that can't be done, if the Iranians basically have been pushed to the point where they correctly draw the conclusion that, well, now we need to hit back and we need to hit back hard, then Trump's got nowhere to go. If he tries to make war on Iran, look at the distance from the United States to Iran. Even though the US has bases in the region, they still need to supply those bases. They still need to be able to ship stuff in, fly stuff in. How are they going to do that if the Iranians can track their aircraft and try and shoot them down? They've never considered that before. Remember, that clown Saddam Hussein just allowed the Americans to build up a gigantic 600,000 strong plus force in the deserts of Saudi Arabia and didn't fire a fucking shot at them because Saddam Hussein was a clown. I know that's going to upset some of our Ba'athist viewers out there, but he was a CIA agent and a fucking clown. I mean, that's why you don't. If you look at like the clownish bullshit that his government engaged in, it's amazing that it lasted as long as it did. This doesn't justify anything that the US did to Iraq fundamentally, but Saddam Hussein took incredibly poor decisions, and the poorest decision he ever took was allowing himself to become the cat's paw of the United States, because those people aren't rewarded. Saddam Hussein wasn't rewarded. The Kurds in Iraq and now in Syria haven't been rewarded either. Ultimately, the Zionists won't be rewarded either. Ultimately, the US, for its own purposes, will sacrifice the state of Israel in a firestorm of war, if it comes down to it. So the attack, if it comes, will by necessity be limited. They're now talking about unleashing special forces in Iran, but the US and the Israelis have been infiltrating special forces groups into Iran for years to assassinate people, to carry out bomb attacks. And the Iranians will be aware of that and hopefully will have countermeasures in place. See, you can't wage this sort of gunboat diplomacy, limited military operation, which is what the entire US armed forces are designed to do, against a country which is going to shoot back and shoot back accurately and isn't prepared to capitulate. And the Iranians have, of course, allies. Their alliance with the Chinese is much more solid now. There are, again, stories, just stories at the moment, but I think it's believable that the Chinese are actually sharing intelligence with the Iranian military on the movements of US forces. Iran does have some satellites that it can use to monitor the US forces, but China has far more. And it's in the interest of the Chinese to make sure that they back their Iranian ally. So it is, and also, of course, there is the question, the developing relationship with the Russians as well, who are supplying certain military equipment to Iran. Now, the other element here is, well, where does Trump go with this? And the answer is, well, whatever he does now is going to be a disaster. Even if they attack Iran, score a lot of cause a lot of damage, kill a lot of people, if the Iranians just keep on resisting, eventually that aircraft carrier group is going to run out of resources and have to return to a port and resupply itself. And even if they bring in more aircraft carrier groups, the same thing's going to happen. They can't invade Iran. They can't you can't defeat a country just with a bombing campaign. Remember, as we've discussed on the Decline and Fall show before, the reason why there is this delusion in the West that bombing campaigns can secure the capitulation of a country is because that's what they think happened in the war on Yugoslavia. It's not what happened. What happened was basically Yeltsin, the Yeltsin clique in the Kremlin, sold Milosevic out and basically said, we will not supply you with energy and we will not assist you. You have to surrender. And that's that point that Milosevic capitulated. Now, we can get into the whether that was a wise decision or not. I don't think it was. But certainly, on Milosevic's part, that is, certainly the victory, in inverted commas, that NATO achieved against Yugoslavia was based on trickery and treachery. Wasn't based on overwhelming military power. Yes, they caused a lot of destruction. They killed a lot of people. They poisoned the earth. But they didn't defeat the Yugoslavs that way. They defeated them via the cutting their knees off via a maneuver with the Yeltsinites. Again, every single time you see some great triumph of Western arms, it's not a triumph of arms at all. It's a triumph of US, British control of global financial systems and their ability to move around an almost unlimited amount of money, their ability to sanction people, their ability to cut off trade. If they don't have those things anymore, then their military power is actually not all that impressive, as we've seen from their unwillingness and their fear of directly confronting the Russians in Ukraine. They're still afraid of directly confronting the Russians in Ukraine. The only reason that war's still going is not because of the great power of the West. It's because the Russian tactics are focused on the annihilation of Ukrainian personnel rather than the taking of land. That and the fact that the Russian bourgeoisie still fucking wants to find some kind of shady deal with the United States, which of course the United States won't provide them with. So we then get into, I'll now turn to the question of the Epstein files, because this is an important question which I think does need addressing. So the Epstein files, of course, relate to a series of releases that have been done by the U.S. House of Representatives and also the Department of Justice relating to the various investigations into Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there's all kinds of shit that's come out over the last few days, which leads me to believe that some in the US have had enough of Trump and have decided that they're going to get rid of it, because the stuff that's come out about Trump is incredibly damaging. the allegations include, I mean, allegations in the some of the released documents, because the DOJ put out a document that slightly redacted, but contained a lot of the allegations against Trump, going back to 1984. And then what happened was that suddenly disappeared, but like all the journalists had already saved it, so basically just tweeted it all over the place. If you read that document, I mean, Jake Tapper of CNN, that creep, tweeted it out. You read that document, you can see in it there's some truly heinous stuff that Trump and Epstein are accused of. Some of which relates to like stuff I would have found unbelievable even just a couple of years ago, like the idea that Trump was involved in like human sacrifice and stuff like that. I mean, the only doubt I would have that Trump would be involved in that is that Trump is such an extreme physical coward that I don't think he would have the stomach for it, to be honest. But a lot of the other stuff, a lot of the other stuff is very believable. Like the stuff about like Trump and Epstein raping models, the stuff about Trump and Epstein like having like obscene orgies with underage girls. Go and read it. I'm not going to go through all of it here, but it's pretty fucking nauseating shit that is in there. And if Trump is guilty of even half of the stuff that's in there, he should go to prison for the rest of his miserable life or face something more than that. Now, in terms of assessing Trump's guilt, what we can do is we can just compare the allegations in there to stuff that Trump has said and done, and also to stuff that has been to legal cases that have been brought against Trump. We know that Trump is a violent man towards women. That was alleged credibly by his former wife, now deceased former wife, who he was married to, I think, in the 1980s and early 1990s, and there was a case brought by her against him, which alleged that when she like laughed at his hair transplant, like he beat her and raped her, basically. That was like a court. That was like there was court documents that confirmed that. There was Trump, of course, on the infamous Access Hollywood tape, was caught saying "grab him by the pussy" with reference to I think models, and there's allegations about things very much like that regarding underage girls in this document. So given that Trump himself was openly boasting about that, I think it's fair to say that that's something that is a very credible accusation. There is also accusations and testimony from like a driver who says that Trump was engaged with a conversation in the back of a limousine or something that was so extreme about the kind of like sex crimes he was involved in, that him and Jeffrey were involved in, that he almost stopped the car and like threw Trump out. So I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that given what we know about Trump from his own confessions, court cases that have been brought against him, and things he's been convicted, he's been credibly accused of in the past, that he did a lot of this shit. Then there's that weird birthday card he sent to Epstein, which is just strange. Just like you do wonder if the story about him and Bill Clinton is true. If Bill Clinton posed for Jeffrey Epstein in the dress. But certainly all the rape stuff, the orgy stuff, and stuff like that, I would say it's all true. And this leads me to the political point here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about like what's the contents of this stuff. I can in the future if there's a demand for it. But what I will say about it is this: why is anybody surprised? This isn't new. None of this is new. This is what they've always been like. The bourgeoisie. They are deeply twisted, deeply perverted, group who have the sexual habits of the characters from a Marquis de Sade novel. That's what they've always been like. Back in the earliest stages. I mean, the Marquis de Sade was writing basically a satire of that class, and that's what they're like. They are people who make their money by exploiting people to the point of death, and they are so far beyond. I'm talking about the highest levels of the bourgeoisie and their lackeys. They are people who are so far beyond being able to be touched by any justice system. They are people who are so far beyond being constrained by the normal rules of basic human behavior that they get into. This is what they get into. This is what a life unconstrained looks like. This is what viewing the entire human race as just a plaything for your degenerate pleasures. This is what it leads you to. And it's no surprise that the other names feature in there, such as, of course, Peter Mandelson, Tony Blair. Tony Blair was accused many years ago, of when he was prime minister, of blocking the biggest anti-pedophile police investigation in Britain, called Operation Ore. It was over 1,500 prosecutions. Blair is accused of blocking certain people, certain cases from going forward because it implicated so many people in his own circle. There were stories about that 20 years ago. I remember it very well. They remember also the role of a certain Sir James Savile, better known to his friends, which included Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher, as Jimmy. Now, Jimmy Savile, basically a sort of, I wouldn't say he was a sort of British Jeffrey Epstein, but similar thing going on with him. Jimmy Savile confessed to his habits in his earliest autobiography, which was published in the early 1970s, because he was a big name on television at the time, big name on the radio. And he said in his book that runaway teenage girls would sometimes turn up at his house seeking refuge because he was a celebrity, and that he would have his way with them, then deposit them at the local police station the next day, and that no one there would dare say a word to him, because if he was tackled, that he would, and someone tried to take him down in the police, that he would take half the station down with him. Now, that wasn't an empty boast, given the number of people that Savile was involved with and who were in the political hierarchy. Now, this leads us to zoom out even further. Savile is just one pervert who was connected to various different people, including the British royal family, who were also, of course, directly connected to Epstein. Now, if you consider this, and you consider like the nature of like the sex crimes which are outlined in the Epstein files. This is not just the case of like the a few people in the elite doing foul and perverted things, even though that's what's going on. This is the culture of the ruling class, and the ruling class's culture, of course, is the dominant culture. And so, is it any surprise that since they have felt in the last 35 years completely and utterly unconstrained, that the domestic working class movements in the West have all been defeated, that the international socialism, that is what the USSR used to stand for, and did so until fairly close to the end, even in distorted ways. Since all of that has gone, the bourgeoisie of the imperialist countries has felt completely unrestrained. And so, therefore, what do? They openly push for things like complete legalization and a free-for-all when it comes to prostitution, a free-for-all when it comes to pornography, a free-for-all when it comes to stuff like gender ideology. This is all like the foul products of their culture. This is what bourgeois culture is. The Epstein files aren't just the activities and the foul proclivities of one man or a small group of men. They represent the culture of the ruling class as a whole. This is what they do. This is what they're into. This is how they treat people. This is how they carry on. And the entire system, of the police forces, the secret police forces, the media, academia, all kinds of journalists, including, of course, Michael Tracy, who hasn't posted for 2 days, is dedicated to covering up these crimes. That's the system we live in. So it's not just Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump or Jimmy Savile being like rogue perverts. This is the system. They are promoted because, in terms of the politicians, they are promoted because they are perverted. Has anybody explained, by the way, just in passing, has anybody explained why 5 Ukrainian male models have been apparently engaged in a serious attempt to assassinate the British Prime Minister? Doesn't that strike people as a little weird? Doesn't that strike people as something which is worthy of comment? But no comment whatsoever. Because again, this is the culture. This is the culture of the ruling class. They are rapists. They are degenerates. They are whoremongers. They are prolific addicts of pornography. They are drug addicts. This is the culture that, just to pick up on Edward's comment in the chat, this is the culture that the Russian and Soviet counter-revolutionaries brought in to the Soviet Union. This is the freedom that they go on about. It's their freedom to suck the blood from living labor and also to exploit and to literally rape whole nations and turn the women and the children of those nations into their sex trafficked objects. It's no coincidence that the biggest sex trafficking locations in the world are where? Ukraine, Kosovo, and Israel. And again, that's not, some crazy Marxist making it up. That's confirmed by bourgeois sources. What is one of the worst places in the world in terms of being a hideout for sex criminals? It's Israel. And again, not my claim, but many reports in the Israeli press itself, which confirm that. So this is the freedom that the fucking dirty, disgusting compradors of Iran want. This is the freedom they want the entire nation to be reduced to the status of whoredom for these fucking vampires in Washington and London and Paris and Berlin. This is the freedom that you want, to be ruled by this foul collection of pedophile rapists. Because look at what they have done to Ukraine. Half of all the prostitutes in Berlin are Ukrainian women. That's the freedom that the Soviet counter-revolutionaries gave to Ukraine. The freedom for young women to be reduced to the status of a prostitute. The freedom for women to be trafficked out of Ukraine to Germany, to Britain, to the United States, to Israel, to be abused, to be exploited by these fucking creeps and their lackeys. That's the system you live under. It's a system run by rapists. That's the freedom that the West stands for. So whenever you see some fucking politician going on about the freedom of the West, just know that there is a better than even chance that that guy has done, or woman, but mostly guys, has done some foul, disgusting shit. Now, I'll just conclude on this. Those on the left who promote prostitution, who promote pornography, who promote gender ideology, those three, that trifecta of horror, these people are promoting bourgeois ideology, the atomizing, alienating, disgusting criminal bourgeois ideology is promoted by the bulk of the Western left. Now, I will conclude on this point. This leads me to the point that Stalin made, which is that these Western leftists are no better than degenerate fascist scum. If you want this kind of freedom, if you think that this kind of so-called freedom is good, then you are no better than the worst kind of fascist. So fuck these people. And may the regime changers and the imperialists be defeated by the Iranian patriots and the revolutionaries. Thank you for watching tonight. I will return to you tomorrow. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. I'll be back with you again very soon. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Утреннего стяг в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.
Имминент!